And I'm back. I know someone was on earlier. I think it was Andy. But yeah, that was just a quickie test. So let's get to it, shall we? So, what do we have here? What is this a picture of? Who is this person? Why are they in such a good mood? We'll just draw a little bit till some more folks show up, and then we'll get to it. So, if I have to explain it, this is a little girl, and she's very excited at the prospect of eating whatever this is. And what is it? It looks like a kind of a bubble hat or a flying saucer. No. This is a plate. And on top of that plate is what's commonly referred to in the lore of this imaginary land I've created as a crystal cake. And she is about to put her little hands on it. But why am I showing this? Well, that's a good question. Because this little crystal cake Hey, I'm back. Hello, sir. Good day, sir. Good day to you, sir. So what I'm drawing here is, this is a dessert. We'll say it's a dessert from the land of Castlegrad, right? So Castlegrad is like a town known for its baked goods and unique sweets. And this is a little girl that's got her little hands up in the air, and she's about to touch this thing called a crystal cake. What this basically amounts to is a big transparent bubble made of gelatin. So what does this have to do with this? What does this little confectionery delight from a land far away have to do with the so-called horrors that I'm about to describe? Well, crystal cake, or in some places jelly tarts, or water pies, all kind of describe some kind of similar transparent, clear pastry, right? But it's also the nickname of a particularly nasty assemblage of creatures that travelers will typically encounter in their journeys in one form or another. And these are slimes, and I guess you could call them like flesh devourers. But yeah, so you've got. Let's say what this is. Let's go ahead and label this crystal cake. Oops. The cake eats you? No, no, no. You eat the cake. You eat the cake. The cake is just a gelatin blob. You've probably seen YouTube videos. Not to take you out of the scene, just de-immersed you. But so a crystal cake is we'll call it a tasty gelatin cake. And then over here we'll say also a nickname for slimes and all manner of flesh dissolvers and we'll call them land of jellies. So yeah, what you end up with so basically, unlike a seafaring jellyfish that most folks are familiar with, these are a kind of weird form of land-dwelling jellyfish, if you will, or just blobs like this slime, which it's just this sort of ambling, weird semi-transparent blob that comes in a variety of colors, and if it comes in contact with anything fleshy, it eats it and then dissolves it right down to the bone. Sometimes they'll even dissolve the bone. You got it, Chris. Yeah, it's a it's a it's a weird blob of delicious confection. You found it. You found the crystal cake. So what happens is, as you're traveling along, there are a number of different kinds of these, but the very, very, very worst of them is let's say in our world, it would be a Portuguese Man of War. All right? A Portuguese Man of War is a very large saltwater jellyfish that kind of looks like a weird looking blob with some frills around it. And it's got a sort of almost like a mohawk, you might call it, that a crest. And it has all these long tendrils that can stretch out for, I think, something like 15 feet or 30 feet or something crazy. But each one of these tendrils is covered with teeny tiny barbs. So if you were to zoom in on one of these things to like a magnifying glass, what you would see is that one of these tendrils has all these little sharp rods on it. At least that's my understanding. And each one of these little sharp rods, and we're talking super tiny, like a fiber or a hair. But each one of these, on these long tendrils, has all these little barbs on them that when they come in contact with someone will paralyze them instantly. I forget what the exact chemical is or reaction is, but the end result is you become paralyzed in the water. You can't breathe. You can't move your muscles. You essentially just you're freezing in place, and it's from what I understand extremely. I mean, it's just excruciatingly painful to get hit by one of these things. But basically, yeah, you go into shock and you die. I think it's something like you basically just stop breathing. Like all your stuff just shuts down because this thing basically it just paralyzes you. And if you're in the water, that's no good. If you're a fish, even worse, because then this thing, it paralyzes the fish. The fish just sits there, and then it gets eaten alive by this. I mean, what a way to go, right? So, yeah, that's what this is. What I'm going to be discussing today is the land version of that, which to me I think is by far more scary and creepy because they have not really a calcium bone, but I think what's the reference? The word they refer to it as is it chitinous? Let me see if I can find it. Well, chitinous is an exoskeleton, so I guess technically it's not really. It says arachnids and crustaceans have it. So chitin is a nitrogen-containing polysaccharide related chemically to cellulose that forms a semi-transparent, horny substance. Yeah, okay. I think chitin is a pretty good word for it. So we'll call it a chitinous a chitinous barb. Alright, so how would that look? How would it look? I guess let's start with the biggest one. So we said land jellies. Include several species. Of slime. The simplest and easiest to avoid and describe. Just put the kettle on for some tea, no milk. Oh no. I am awaiting my coffee. I like tea, actually. Just not something I've grown into a habit of drinking a lot or regularly. The simplest and easiest to avoid and describe as well as being the most primitive of the species. We'll just put a little hand or something in there. All right. So now we know what the slimes are. We've established the baseline. A slime is just a spherical, clear blob that ambles along the ground, and it just digests whatever crosses its path. What would we call this one? We could call this one the we'll call this one let's call this one a okay, we'll call it a dungeon fairy. What other word could we use? All right, let's say, so as not to bore everyone to death who's watching. So this slime is about the size of a lantern. And is nocturnal and emits light as it floats through the air. Hence the name. Hey, yes, Rom. This is the right volume for 8:30 a.m. Yeah. You spoke too soon because now you got me talking. So we'll just do a quick recap since you're here. So what this is I started off with showing a little kid, in this case a little girl, at a table in front of what's called a crystal cake, which is basically this clear gelatin cake that she's really anxious to eat. And what does this have to do with monsters in a travel guide, right? So the reason I bring up the crystal cake is because that's also the nickname of these variety of slimes. They also call them jellies, flesh dissolvers. They're all part of this species of creature that's transparent and ambling. In other words, they don't really have any kind of method of guiding themselves around. There's no visible eyes, nose, or any other kind of sensory organ. So yeah, they just kind of like wander around and eat whatever gets in their way. They're similar to jellyfish in the ocean. I was describing what a man of war does. The way it's got tiny little barbs on all its tendrils, and the way it when it paralyzes its prey, it eats it alive and digests it. Well, with the big slimes, the big round ones that I think most people who've played Dungeons and Dragons are familiar with, they're just kind of round blobs. Although this version doesn't really have any kind of rhyme or reason for doing what it does, it just wanders along the ground, comes in contact with something it can eat, and it dissolves it and eats it. However, in this little world I've created, there are other types of slimes. And you've got the spheroid ones, which just kind of wander around and eat whatever. And then you've got what I was describing here, which is sometimes referred to as a dungeon fairy. I think jelly jar is another word it might be named for, but this one's probably, they call these floating lanterns also. So this is a kind of slime, but it has a gaseous pouch like a hot air balloon. It's about the size of a lantern, so I'd say about maybe 9 inches in diameter by about a foot long, and maybe another 6 to 7 inches of tendrils hanging down, and it just floats around, literally like a floating lantern in the air. So you might come across them in caves at night, or you might come across it in a dungeon or in the forest, and it just floats around and glows. Really pretty harmless to human beings, but not recommended to touch them because they do the same thing that the other things do. They paralyze their prey. The tendrils aren't exactly painless, though they probably don't inject enough of their toxin or neurotoxin or whatever it is they use to paralyze people with to be of any great distress to a large human being. These mostly just float around and eat bugs that land on their skin or get caught by the tendrils or that are attracted to the light. They're opportunists, so if they come across a dead bird, on the ground, and they happen to cross it with its tendril and they recognize it as food, they'll go down and they'll digest it. They turn that digested material into minerals and vitamins it needs to survive. The rest is, as it's digested, made into a gas that lets it float around. So there you go. There's your number 2. Number 1 was the round one. Number 2 is the sort of floating lantern style. And number 3 is kind of a larger version of this with a little bit more of a menacing and harmful to humans kind of trope to it. So let's go that route. So not recommended to touch one as its tendrils cause pain to eat odd ear, nose, or finger. Hey BJ, we're talking about slimes today. So I was just telling Ezra, I started as a little kid eating a crystal cake or trying to get to one on a table, which is like a clear gelatinous bubble that's sweet and tasty, but also the nickname of round earth slimes. Slimes that roll around the ground and eat anything that's in their path. I compared them to large jellyfish because there are also floating slimes. This one's called, nickname is a fairy dungeon or dungeon fairy, or a floating lantern because it's about the size of a lantern. Comes out at night, eats bugs, floats around in the air. Turns the digested insects into a gas it uses to float, and the rest into nutrients. So that's number 2, and now number 3 is coming up. Boom. Climates or locations where might actually find themselves in a school of floating lantern type. I would say like temperate climates. I wouldn't expect them to be in a frigid area. Their fragile skins probably couldn't handle it. So not likely to see it in a cold environment or in the winter. I would expect even in areas that are seasonal, where it's wintry and it has a nice warm summer, spring, or fall, you might catch them while they're, I guess, how would they hatch? I guess they would just be a sort of, what I understand about actual jellyfish is there are two in particular, two species that are intriguing to me, and that's one they call the Eternal Jellyfish, which is a pretty large jellyfish that once it reaches a certain stage, it starts to break down until so in other words, you've got a really large kind of creature, right? And this is a real creature I'm describing, not an imaginary one. If you want to go Google it, go Google it. But so what happens is they've got it's this giant jellyfish, and when it dies, or the way it reproduces, is it basically just breaks down. Like, it starts to deteriorate until it's down to like a tiny little version of itself, right? But the weird thing about it is, and what scientists have discovered, is that it's not a baby. It isn't an offspring. It's the same jellyfish. And so it reaches a certain stage where I guess it either can't grow anymore, or it's gotten too old and it can't support itself. It breaks down to this tiny version of itself, and then it starts the process of growing all over again, even though it's the same organism, the same cells. So It's kind of like Benjamin Button or something of jellyfish. So if you were to compare this to like a human, it would be the equivalent of being born as a baby, growing into an old man, and then by the time you're an old man and you can no longer kind of move around, all your skin falls off, and your bones and guts and fat and everything just kind of slough off, and underneath is another baby, and then that baby grows into another old man. So yeah, that's why they call it. They think, and then when I say they, I mean, there's still a lot of speculation about what it is that this thing is and how it works. But yeah, they call it the immortal jellyfish because apparently, if you're just recycling the same cells, you're technically living forever, right? I don't know that they know how long it's been around, but anyway, so that's one type. The other one, and I don't remember what this one's called, but some have referred to it as one of the largest living organisms on the planet, if not just in the ocean. And it's basically like a collection of jellyfish that sort of are stuck together and just wander the ocean in a huge colony. But it's effectively one organism. You can't even say it's got a hive mind, but it's basically like seeing a bunch of plastic floating balloons in the ocean all stuck together, and then everything they come in contact, they just kind of eat. So, yeah, there you go. Weird. Stuff is weird, man. Stuff is weird. And I've got this on my drawing pad, so I guess we'll make the best of it. We'll just say some land jellies collect in groups and they wait for prey. Still others simply float I'm sketching a little diagram of how this particular jellyfish captures its prey. Floats, touches, opens, envelops, and eats. Looks like a My Little Pony or something. So what's this? This is the jellyfish opening up like a big umbrella. Source has gone to the jellyfish experience. I don't know much about jellyfish. This is very interesting. Well, good. At least somebody's interested in the jellyfish. So, but just to be clear, Mark, these are not real jellyfish. Now, the two I described earlier, you can go Google, and those are real jellyfish. The jellyfish I'm doing here are imaginary, and they live on land and not the ocean, which makes them a whole other beast. Something you probably wouldn't want to come in contact with. Let's see. What's a good name? What's a good name for something that's large and gelatinous, big enough to eat a man, a grown man, whole, and can spear them? Oh yeah, I've been to Monterey Bay Aquarium. I heard it's nicer these days than it used to be back in my day, back in the 80s. Um, so let me think. By far the most frightening and deadly of these land jelly creatures is the. Let's give it a name. What shall we name this one? We'll call it. Um, I'll call this one the Carthian. Flesh Fiend. Also known in the Empire let's say instead of Empire, let's say the Imperial lands as so-called because it was Sir Artemis Gendry, who was its known All right, so that's a 9-footer. So let's say this is a 16-footer. Looks kind of like a Christmas tree, right? All right, guys, give me 1 second. I'll be right back. You can look at the pretty pictures. I'm just gonna grab my coffee. All right, now I can start my day. Coffee, coffee, coffee. Sarah, I would like to explain this to you, but you can go back and look at the other 2 videos. I'm not going through all that all over again for one person. All right, so we were talking about the jellies, the slimes. Here we go. So we just got to the biggest, baddest, meanest, nastiest, most evilest. So Thombi, if you go back and watch the first 2 videos, there's a basically what this amounts to is this is supposed to be like a book from a traveling wanderer slash merchant who goes from city to city throughout this sort of medieval Dungeons and Dragons type world. And he's made a pretty good name for himself, you know, selling all sorts of sundries, teas and dried meats and whatnot. And so he was looking at making some extra money. He's like, you know, I've seen a lot of stuff. Maybe if I put it all in a book and describe some of the things I've seen that are maybe best avoided, maybe I could make some money selling this thing. So he makes this little traveling merchant's guide, and in it he describes all of the nasty critters that the average Joe may not know about, because they you know, or average city dweller who doesn't do a lot of traveling might not be familiar with, so they can try to avoid it. And describes, you know, in his little guidebook, some of these things that maybe you might encounter and be best advised to stay away from. So he'll give brief descriptions and draw some little pictures. And, you know, maybe it's not written the best way. He's not an author of fine literature. He's just a guy that, hey, maybe don't do this. So that's where you're at. Yeah, I'm the sole author. This is the 4th video of this little travel guide. Yeah, it's a bestiary, sort of like a what do they call it? A xenobiologist or cryptozoologist guide to the sort of beasties of the world. So bestiary travel guide, perfect example, perfectly good description of it. So I just described the ambling slimes, the big sort of basketball. They might be anywhere from about this size This is actually a pretty good version of what you might think of as a slime. So let's say a slime starts off as a little pebble-sized thing, grows into about something this size, and it just kind of goes around and says, "Oh, that looks delicious to eat," and just kind of goes over it and eats it. Um, this can get to about the size of a basketball and maybe even as big as a bean bag. So that's slime type number 1, and these come in a variety of shapes, sizes, and color. Well, not shapes; they're all just big gelatinous blobs, but different colors, different sizes. But they're all pretty much the same. Whatever they envelop, they basically digest. Then you've got the floating lantern type that are more like nocturnal. And they're about the size of, like a lantern. They float around, and, bugs come up on them, and they eat them. And if they happen to graze your ear or your face, watch out, because they'll sting you, and they'll try to eat whatever they touch. So harmless for the most part, but not something you want to, wrap around it. Then you've got what I was describing earlier, more of these larger floating types that can eat, say, things like small dogs. And then the big nasty, big bad is this Carthian flesh fiend, also referred to in the Imperial lands as Gandry's ghost. Because this guy named Sir Artemis Gandry was the first person in the Imperium to be eaten by one. So, yeah. He was unfortunate enough to be its first victim in that region. So yeah, they call him Gandry's ghost. But everywhere else in the world, they refer to them as flesh fiends or Carthian flesh fiends, because that's the region they typically hang out in, is Carthia. Totally made up place, not a real place. Don't go looking for it in a geography book or in your Google map. So, let's describe this guy. All right. So what is it? What is different about this thing besides it's just gigantic? Well, the first thing is just like a jellyfish, or rather, the land jellyfish. It floats around. see. So the largest of these things, the ones that would swarm, Mark, would be some of the ground jellies. They kind of form little colonies. I was describing some other ones that kind of pack together. These little lanterns tend to show up in numbers. Anywhere from 10 in a dungeon to 30 or 40 or even 100 just floating around through the forest. But like I said, those are mostly pretty harmless. They're fairly seasonal. These larger ones are more independent. You won't see them in like the one that's big enough to eat a dog. You're not really going to see like 20 or 30 of those anywhere. Maybe 2 or 3 at most in a group. And these really big ones that are nasty and evil, you'll probably only ever see one if you live to tell about it. So what I'm describing here is, unlike the larger jellyfish or land jellies that float around in the air and kind of drag their tendrils around, they're gonna see the ground and just kind of like, there's something, and then eat it, right? So they might find something that touches the ground, might be a small cat or a mouse, and just eat that. This thing, not only does it not float close to the ground, but it can fly fairly high in the air, and somehow, through some unknown means, or as yet unknown means, it can actively hunt for food. In the air, on the ground, wherever it encounters it. But yeah, so it literally goes looking for specific things it understands to be food and eats them, which in the case of this thing is virtually anything it comes in contact with, short of there isn't a lot that it has to fear of, other than humans trying to kill it and light it on fire. This thing will typically hunt at night, but sometimes during the day. At night it is particularly deadly because it's really hard to see something that's sort of semi-transparent and completely silent and can float through the air effortlessly. So what this thing is let's start with the head section. So we already know it's kind of pointy at the top. Something like that. Kind of like a rocket or a shark. And then it's got very large tendrils. What's different about this one than any of the other ones is, besides being the only one that can actively hunt its prey and not just accidentally run into it, it also is the only one that has a semi-solid weapon on it in the form of these barbed sections at the end of these very long fleshy tendrils. So it's got the same tendrils as everybody else. The one's covered with tiny little barbed needles that cause paralysis. But then on top of that, it has a number of, and they could be anywhere from 5 to 4 or 3 or more even of these sort of thicker tentacles or tendrils, and it's able to launch these in the direction of its prey. And they've got this sort of I was talking about it early when Andy was on. It's a chitinous material, so it's not bone, but it's very hard, like the shell of an insect. No, the only thing different about it in the daytime is it might be easier to see with light, but if it's up in the air and it's at a distance, you may not even be able to make it out, because these things are all kind of semi-transparent. So it's really difficult to see in the daytime, but it's even more difficult to see at night. So the daylight isn't really a factor in terms of anything that would cause it any particular harm. It's not impossible to kill. If you light it on fire, it'll burn. The trick is getting it to light on fire. So one good trick is, if you're out looking for this thing, is first make yourself available. Maybe put something out like a goat tied to a stick as a decoy, as bait. Wait with a bunch of hunters in the woods with some lit arrows, and then launch those lit arrows at the thing and see if it burns out of the sky. It may be attracted to heat, so if you've got a lit fire, it might go to that first and try to eat you. Usually best thing to do is avoid where they are at. So when this thing is fully spread out, it's going to look something like this. And let's see, a person would look something like that. Yeah, I'm able to see the chat today. So, yeah, a lot of that happened because I tried to see my live streams. If I live stream from my phone, I can't see anything on my phone screen because I'm just looking at what I'm filming. And the issue I had with my other live stream, if you recall, was I tried to schedule it, and for whatever reason, whenever I schedule it, it just never really works. So what I've done or started doing is just if I'm going to do a live stream, I found the most successful ones are I just let people know what time it's going to be, and then I just get set up and make sure everything works a little bit beforehand, and just start it at the time instead of waiting to logging into one I've scheduled because it sort of never seems to work for me. Yep. So let's talk about these barbs. Oh, cool. That's not a very good description. They're not tentacles. All right. So yeah, this thing that is attached to the end of the sort of large whip tentacles, the real thick ones, are kind of dark and they end in these really sharp points meant to slice up and basically ruin your day. And they don't just drag around, they can be lashed out and directed at an object. So these things aren't just sitting around waiting, floating around looking for something to bump into them. They're actually able to hunt for it, search for it day or night, fly through the sky without any noise or making any sound. They don't make any particular sound in particularly. Yeah, so what they do is they are large, lumbering, silent killers that pretty much paralyze you and or impale you with these huge spikes. And while you're still alive, float down on your body and digest you while you're still breathing until you can't anymore. Fun. So yeah, they're scary and they're really gigantic. This little thing right here, that little silhouette, that's a human. Like an average adult human. So, that'll give you an idea of the scale of this thing. And they definitely have a taste for humans. But yeah, you could technically go out and hunt one of these things. It'd just be really difficult. If you did it alone, you're just about guaranteed to die. If there's one wandering around in your area, the best thing to do is try to avoid going outside and wait for it to just find another hunting ground. Otherwise, yeah, you just kind of have to live with these things. They're out there. They're looking for food. Once they're full, they'll stop for a while to digest their food. That's probably the best time to kill them, is when they're most vulnerable, and that's just when they're sitting down and digesting these things. At least that's the theory, right? But yeah, scary. Who's Mickey? Yeah, I used to, just to jump in on your chat conversation, if any of you are in Texas, or maybe you're familiar with it, you're probably familiar with Coachella or some of the other British music festivals that are out there. The one here in Texas, the big one, I think is probably the biggest in I'd say the United States. I could be wrong, but it's definitely the biggest in Texas. Is the one they have in Austin every year called ACL, or Austin City Limits, and every year they have literally about 100 bands come out, and they range from all genres, all sizes, all levels of popularity. So you've got your headliners, which are usually some classic, like really well known old band or singer. It's usually going to be like someone who sold millions and millions of copies of their records, or have been around for decades. Or it's going to, and they'll usually pick someone who's like a really, really popular modern artist. So, I mean, just to give you an example, one year I was there, it was the two big headliners were Kanye West and Stevie Wonder. That's playing at the same venue. It was just insane. But in addition to them, there was also the Flaming Lips. Metallica was out there one year. The lead singer of Led Zeppelin was out there one year doing his thing with this other lady. I forget her name. But yeah, Robert Plant was there. There was the Yeah Yeah Yeahs. Depeche Mode played one year. The Cure. And then a bunch of other more modern bands that maybe you guys might or might not have heard of. But yeah, I mean, you get rappers out there. You've got house music, western, like country music, jazz, blues, gospel, you name it. I mean, it's just everything's out there. It's insane. It's insane. And it runs it used to be just one weekend from Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And that would be from about 10 a.m. to 10:30 at night, all 3 days. I've been going since it started, which was like, must have been, I think it's been like 15 years now. But the last time I went was in 2019, before all this other crap started. And then now it's I mean, I haven't been since then, since this pandemic crap started. But yeah, now it's like instead of one weekend, they have it for 2 weekends. So you have week 1 and week 2, and some of the headliners might vary, but most of the same people are there both weekends. You just might have some bigger names on weekend 1 than weekend 2, or vice versa. So if you wanted to see, for instance, the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, or you wanted to see I don't know, Chet Faker or somebody like that, one might be playing week 1 and the other one might be playing week 2. So you have to kind of decide who you like more in that case. But either way you go, I mean, it's insane. They've got booze. They've got, I think it was something like 10 stages. 10 different huge, not little stages, like 10 stages that are enormous. And then they've got some sort of indoor venues and some other stuff. All the same stuff you see in any other music festival these days. But, the food and the booze and everything else. And then there's people who pay for VIP sections, which to me it's ridiculous. I would say the tickets start around $300 and go all the way up to $1,000 pretty easily. But yeah, I'd say ACL is probably one of the best venues in the U.S. anyway. So I've got 11:52, so we're kind of right on schedule. I'd say about 8 minutes left before noon. Anybody got some questions about anything? Do you have any questions about anything you have seen today? Any fears? Any concerns? Any questions? Have you tried a crystal cake? Have you anybody ever heard of that? Like, you can go online. I don't know if they started it in Japan. I think it was made of agar. Andy had pulled up a recipe found online for one. You know, I don't have a problem. I saw Kanye in concert. And yeah, as a human being, he's a train wreck. The guy is insane. He's always been kind of nuts. I think he might be schizophrenic or even or definitely bipolar, but he definitely has some mental issues. The guy just can't. I think he's in serious need of some meds. Poor guy. You know, I can sympathize with him if he's. You know, it doesn't matter how rich you are. You know, money doesn't buy you happiness, but it helps a lot. I'd say that in general, Kanye as an entertainer, man, that guy's awesome. I'm not a huge fan of his, but as an entertainer, Kanye, he knows what he's doing. He's good. Beyonce too. Now as people, I don't really care for them. As singers, I think they're immensely talented. If Glastonbury was originally a rock festival, now I'm glad you brought that up because there's this thing called the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Perhaps you've heard of it. And they have inducted so many, I'm going to go on a personal rant now. They've inducted so many singers and bands that to me have nothing to do with rock and roll. Nothing to do with rock and roll. And yet so many bands, real rock bands, have never even been inducted. It's ridiculous. You can do a search right now. Just go to Google. Humor me. Go do a search for rock bands that have never been inducted into the Hall of Fame. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Not the Music Hall of Fame, the Country Music Hall of Fame. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And you'll find people like Barry Manilow. You know? Hey, there's nothing wrong with Barry. I like a little Barry. He's a nice guy, I'm sure. But is he a rock and roll legend? No. Neither is and you can argue with me all you want on this. Neither is Cat Stevens. Cat Stevens? He's a folk singer. He doesn't even do folk singing anymore. He sings like this weird I don't know even how to describe it. He sings like I don't know what it is. It's not rock and roll, I'll tell you that. It's like tantric music or something. Yeah. Kiss. Remember Kiss? You know, like Kiss. They were actually snubbed for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame like for 30, 40 years. I think they're in it now, but I mean, at this point, they're just like, yeah, who cares? Thanks for nothing, you know? It's dumb. It's like, yeah, let's do an automotive Hall of Fame and put all the most famous race cars in there. It's like, oh, that sounds good. And then you fill it with balloons, like hot air balloons. Like, oh yeah, this was the hot air balloon race of 1978. It's like, what does that have to do with cars? Nothing. Anyway. So any questions about the schmiggity schmig? Yeah. Should I keep doing this? Should I stop? Should I keep going until I fill it? Would you say this is something that you like to see, don't like to see, would like to see more of? You interested in seeing more bizarre creatures? Because I can fill this thing up with some nasty, nasty monsters. I think I'm going to move on to like some kind of troll type creature next time. Let's just give you a little taste of what that might look like. Let's say it's something like, we'll just do a little silhouette. Of the next one. There you go. That's our next creature. What is it? All right. It's 12 in 2 minutes. So we'll just do the countdown. We'll let you try to figure out what this thing might be. If I decide to do another travel guide episode. I've got to start doing some 5-minute videos to get the algorithm up, because I guess that's what you have to do. I mean, I just do this for fun, so whatever. What's my next one? Got to finish the geisha bots. That's gonna be random. I don't feel like scheduling those. So if you catch me when I'm doing them, you catch me when I'm doing them. Those will be in the garage. They'll probably be on the phone, and I won't be able to see you chit chat. So it's like, yeah, it'll be at my own pace. I still want to make my walking creature. Not walking creature. My what was it going? It was going to be like a 1950s streamliner vacation mech. So I was going to do that aluminum stuff and put it all over that, and then paint it like an Airstreamer, but it's going to be a big upright 4-legged 3-story vacation robot that people hang out in. So I'm going to order probably some little vacationers for that. Maybe I'll do a diorama. I've been wanting to do a diorama. Did anyone watch Kenobi last night? I know it's been on. It's been on since Friday or Thursday. I don't remember which, but I saw the first 2 episodes last night, and I really liked it. And I saw something in there that would be a fun diorama to do, but I don't know. We'll see. Maybe I'll do that. Let's see. Well, it's noon. Time for me to turn into a pumpkin. So we'll talk to you guys later. Thanks for stopping in and viewing or not. But yeah. We'll talk again soon. Bye-bye.